So, Hare Krishna. There is a lot of science in Bhagavad Gita, and this is the topic of today. And this might surprise you because people think Bhagavad Gita is a religious book or it's a philosophical book, but science, that nobody thinks. But today I'm going to show you how there is a lot of science in Bhagavad Gita, although in modern translations you'll not find this kind of understanding, but previous acharyas, previous saints, previous philosophers of India like Madhvacharya, Ramanacharya, Shankaracharya, they have mentioned in their commentaries a lot of science, a lot of maths, physics, biology, etc. So let's get started. Bhagavad Gita has psychology, actually a lot of psychology. Bhagavad Gita is dealing with mind and soul, and this is the verse from Bhagavad Gita where Krishna is telling Arjuna about how psychology works. What are the 5 factors which affects the mind? So place of action, the performer, various senses, many different kind of endeavors, and ultimately the subconscious concept. You can see in the slide the subconscious phenomena. It was discovered by Sigmund Freud, who is father of psychology. But long back in Bhagavad Gita, 5,000 years back, we had this concept of subconscious mind. So here in this slide, we can see this table. Krishna says there are 5 factors. Bhagavad Gita says there are 5 factors which affects mind, and it's just such a beautiful understanding in Bhagavad Gita. And one verse is whole psychology. So different factors are now in modern contemporary science translated into different fields. For example, you can see Daivam, the last factor. Various psychologists, they talk about subconscious phenomena. Or you can see the first factor, Adhishthanam. That's the basis of social psychology and also cognitive psychology. Then there are other developmental psychology, reflex psychology, behaviorism. All these things are mentioned in Bhagavad Gita in just one verse. This is the beauty of Bhagavad Gita and Vedanta. The principles of science are given in Bhagavad Gita. Okay, this is another principle of psychology. This is absolutely amazing, because Bhagavad Gita says in this verse, in this slide, he says that determination which cannot go beyond dreaming, fearfulness, lamentation, moroseness and illusion, such unintelligent determination, O son of Partha, is in mode of darkness. This is the beauty of this verse. And what's the beauty? There is a concept called as tamogun, mode of darkness. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, mode of darkness is identified by such symptoms. So, well, this is a slide in Bhagavad Gita. This verse is talking about various, so many psychiatric disorders. For example, dreaming is the basis of psychosis. Or for example, you can see in the slide, fearfulness, that's the basis of paranoia. Or shokam, that's the basis of depression. Or mania, hysteria. In one verse, Krishna gives the list of so many psychiatric disorders. But the beauty of this verse is, people do not understand that all the psychiatric disorders, the basis of all the psychiatric disorders is mode of darkness, tamogun. This concept of satogun, tamogun, rajogun, that's not there in modern science. So people who are in tamogun or mode of ignorance, they get psychiatric disorders. So according to Gita, if you treat mode of ignorance, you treat psychiatric disorders. That's also a way for treatment of psychiatric disorders. Okay, next, biology. That's there in Bhagavad Gita. And for your surprise, Bhagavad Gita says, Aham bija pradapita, this slide says. So Gita says that all life is originating from God. So Vedanta and Gita does not believe in artificial life or spontaneous generation of life. Life comes from life. That is a view of Vedanta. And even in modern science, nobody has yet proved that life comes from matter. It's a theory, it's a hypothesis, it's it's not a theory, it's a hypothesis, it's a speculation. People are biased, but nobody has proved. In fact, there was one scientist, 𝗙𝗪𝗓 Pasteur. He showed by his theory of spontaneous generation that life doesn't arise by spontaneous generation. We all know, so we all get milk packets in our home, and those packets are pasteurized. Pasteurized means once you boil it, and if you give it pasteurization treatment, germs cannot grow, even if it is packed for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, or whatever. This proves that life doesn't originate from matter, it's by spontaneous generation. But ironically, the trend changed. Scientists thought, okay, fine. So it's proved that life doesn't originate from matter because of pasteurization. This experiment proves. But what did scientists do? They thought maybe at least once life arose from matter. This was their bias, and this was their speculation. So according to Bhagavad Gita, according to Vedanta, life doesn't come from matter, it comes from life, it comes from God. Then this is a beautiful verse in Bhagavad Gita. It speaks about evolution, that evolution is wrong. So there's a lot of talk in West about evolution, Darwin's evolution, blah 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 and whatever. But Gita says, Brahma Sutra 𝗙𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗃 hetu madbir vinishchita. It is specially presented in Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning to cause and effect. So Gita says everything has cause and effect. But if you see evolution says that one species evolve into another species. Okay, fine. But the point is, if you have to prove that evolution is right, fossils are not sufficient. It's not sufficient that you show fossils in various layers and that's all. So dinosaurs evolved into blah blah, so birds and then mammals and then monkeys and then humans. It's not sufficient. You have to show the causal link between them. That's the idea. You have to show that dinosaurs are evolving into birds. That point should be there. There has to be some cause, but there's no cause. People have speculated that those forces are linked with each other. Maybe it's not linked. So that's the point. Gita says that if there is no causal link, there is no theory of science. In evolution there is no causal link, and Gita identifies this fact. So according to Vedanta, evolution is wrong. There is physics in Bhagavad Gita, law of conservation of energy. Newton invented law of conservation of energy, but it's right there in Gita. This is beautiful insight by one of the great stalwart saints of South India, whose name was 𝗪𝗲𝗪𝗀𝗪, and he has written in his commentary Bhagavad Gita that this is a translation about soul which you will find in Gita, that those who are truth, seers of truth, have concluded that of non-existent material body there is no endurance, and of eternal there is no change. Now this is beauty of Gita. In one verse there are so many concepts. In this verse you can give knowledge of soul. Also you can extract law of conservation of energy. You can see the slide. Na asato vidyate bhavo. Na asato means temporary, bhavo means permanent. So what is temporary? That cannot be permanent. What is not there cannot be there. Asat means not there. And abhavo means, na bhavo means what is there cannot be not there. So what is there can never be there. What is not there and what is there can never perish. This is law of conservation of energy. Energy is neither created neither destroyed. It's always there. If there is no energy, it cannot be created out of nowhere. If there is energy, it cannot be destroyed. So this verse talks about law of conservation of energy. It's a beautiful verse about principles of Bhagavad Gita. By the way, one point you have to keep in mind: if you read Gita, after reading Vedanta, you will not be able to make rockets or computers, because that's some detailed thing. But what are the scriptures? They give laws and principles of science. Please keep this in mind, because after hearing seminar, don't come to us and tell, I want to learn how to make rockets, please teach us Vedanta. That doesn't happen like that. You can learn axiomatic truths and principles and laws from Vedanta. Medicine is there. This is Bhagavad Gita 6th chapter 17th verse, and talks about he who is regulated in the habits of eating, sleeping, recreation and work can mitigate all material pangs by practice of the yoga system. Yoga system here mentions to Ayurvedic system, and Ayurveda is a traditional branch of science, of medicine, and Gita mentions about medicine, that what is more important in medicine, in Ayurvedic medicine, most important is balance between eating, sleeping and recreation. If you are not balanced, you are bound to get diseased. This is common sense. This is absolutely common sense. But common sense is uncommon. So Ayurvedic text begins with this concept of balance. Balance in your daily routine, balance in your kapha, pitta, vayu, balance in your humors of the body, balance in intelligence, mind and soul, and balance between spiritual health, bodily health and mental health. Everything has to do with balance. This is about medicine. Precaution is better than cure. Okay, this is beautiful. Bhagavad talks about philosophy. 300 years back, philosophy and science was one. Science was called as natural philosophy. So these three philosophers, they brought a paradigm shift in philosophy. They're so crucial. So Descartes, Ludwig Wittgenstein and Thomas Kuhn, they brought a revolution in philosophy. And Bhagavad Gita talks about these three very revolutions which came in the field of philosophy. First 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita talks about decision, which actually Descartes, he proposed his theory about, that there is something called matter, something called spirituality, mind and matter. He brought a distinction between mind and matter. Then definition. Ludwig Wittgenstein told what matters is definition of words, and that is in the 7th chapter to 12th chapter. And last 13th chapter to 18th chapter, Thomas Kuhn talked about distinction of perspectives. That it talks about perspectives. So the revolution which they brought, the concepts were right there in Bhagavad Gita 5,000 years back. And these philosophers, they came just 300 years back. But the knowledge is there in ancient wisdom. Philosophy. This is the last slide on philosophy. Don't worry about that. I'll not mess you up with philosophy. But Bhagavad talks about much about philosophy. Bhagavad says what is goal of life. This is the absolute perfect definition. I never found this kind of definition anywhere. Upon gaining which there is no greater gain. This should be the goal of life. This should be the goal of life. You can't set a goal of a life which is unsatisfying. This is perfect. And this is what wise people are aiming after. Yoga. Bhagavad Gita talks about science of yoga. This is from Bhagavad Gita verse, and Krishna says yoga. Oh, this is important if you can note this point. Krishna says, who are interested in achieving self-realization through control of mind and senses. Through control of mind and senses. This is very important. Yoga is talking about control of senses and mind. That's the most important thing, which is missing in modern yoga and even traditional yogis. They forgot how to control senses. It's just postures, asanas and music and what all. So Gita talks about principles of yoga. Gita talks about poetry, science of poetry. Beautiful. 7th chapter, 2nd chapter, 15th chapter, you can see the slide. It talks of poetry has 3 components: rasa, dhvani and alankar. Rasa in English means the charm in the poetry, and dhvani means the diction, and alankar means metaphors. So all these components are mentioned in Gita in various verses. Gita uses all these components, and while a person is reading Gita, he can also understand the science of poetry. Astrology is there in Bhagavad Gita. Gita talks about Siddhant Jyotish and Phalit Jyotish in one verse. Siddhant Jyotish is talking about astronomy. Phalit Jyotish is talking about astrology. Both things Krishna talks about in Bhagavad Gita in chapter 6, and you can note in the slide. This is a beautiful slide which talks about both of them, Siddhant Jyotish and Phalit Jyotish. Models. It is talking about science of morality. Chapter 16 is talking about science of morality. Morality has three parts. One is personal conduct, which is called achar. Second is social norms and civil laws, that is called vyavahar. And third is prayashchit, punishment. 16 chapter, 1st verse to 8th verse, Krishna talks about personal conduct. 9th to 20th verse about social norms, and 21st to 24th verse about punishment. This is Gita. Gita talks about spiritual science, and this is very important. This is perfect definition of spiritual science. Gita says, 𝗙𝗲𝗹𝗶 𝗪𝗲𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀. What is spiritual science? Spiritual science means to, adhyat means spiritual, 𝗙𝗲 means nature. Spiritual science means to change your nature. If any spirituality, any devotion, whatever scripture you read, if your nature doesn't change, there is no spirituality. It should change. The eternal nature is called self. That is why Krishna defines spirituality as nature of the being. And when a person is situated in his own nature, in his original form, that is the purpose of spirituality. That is spirituality. This is the definition of Bhagavad Gita about spirituality. People need not be confused about spirituality. It's mysticism, it's something euphoria, it's something divine light, divine experience. It's all nonsense. This is the perfect definition of spirituality. And this is the final science in Bhagavad Gita. Gita says, to remember and serve God, that is the goal of life. That is real science. All sciences should help us to remember God and serve God. This is the motto of understanding science through Gita. This is the real purpose of doing science and exploring science, to prove the existence of God, to remember Him, to serve Him, and to love Him. Thank you very much for listening to this seminar on science in Gita. Hare Krishna.